Ask anyone who collected baseball cards during the junk wax era, and this card will probably be on their top 5 list. It's the 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, which is iconic for several reasons and has a pretty cool backstory of how the card came into existence. Plus, there are a few interesting facts about this card that might surprise you. But let's start from the beginning. Back in 1989, Upper Deck, a card manufacturer now mostly known for their hockey cards, released its first baseball card set, and card number 1 features yours truly, Ken the Kid Griffey Jr. Now this set for some collectors leaves a bad taste in their mouth because it's attributed by some to kicking off what is known as the junk wax era, where print runs were out of control. Every collector thought they could become rich with their cardboard collection, only to see the inevitable bubble burst with supply crushing demand. But push that aside, and we still got this iconic card. Yes, printed in the millions, but it almost didn't happen at all. To determine the top slot, the number 1 card for this inaugural set, Ken Griffey Jr. wasn't necessarily the number 1 choice back then. For starters, he hadn't played AAA ball at that point in his storied career, and he wasn't even expected to be called up to the big show in that 1989 season. But Upper Deck wanted to kick off their set with a young star who could be a generational talent. And the hyped prospect back then, that many collectors thought would be a more obvious choice, was Greg Jeffries. Also strongly considered was Sandy Alomar Jr. and Gary Sheffield. To help choose who should be the number 1 card, they ultimately turned to a guy named Tom Guidman, who was a college student at the time with experience working at a card shop. And his specialty was to determine which rookie cards to invest in by analyzing minor leaguers who might be a top prospect. So it was Guidman who suggested Griffey. Here's what he said in a past interview. And the reason I projected Griffey to be so fantastic is because he could do everything. He had the sweetest left-handed swing. Griffey was also the number 1 overall pick as a high school player in the 1987 draft. And it didn't hurt that Guidman also happened to be a Seattle Mariners fan. Now that it was confirmed to go with Griffey Jr. as the first card in the first ever Upper Deck baseball set, it was time to choose the photo. But since he's never played a big league game at this point, they ended up with a photo of Griffey in a San Bernardino Spirit uniform. Then they pretty much did the equivalent of what we call photoshopping a picture today, so that the S on the cap was changed from silver to yellow, and the star behind the S was removed. They also changed the color of the cap from navy blue to the Mariners royal blue to give us the appearance of the now iconic baseball card we see today. Now some estimate Upper Deck printed more than 2 million copies of this card. Now because this card was the first card and therefore located on the top left corner of the printing sheet, it was more likely to have dinged corners. So getting a perfect PSA 10 grade isn't that easy despite how many of these cards exist. Yet many collectors still try. When the book Mint Condition, How Baseball Cards Became an American Obsession was published back in 2010, it reported that the 1989 Griffey Upper Deck rookie card was the most graded card in PSA history with more than 50,000 graded. Fast forward to 2023 with the boom of the hobby in 2021 and millions of more sports cards graded by PSA, this specific Griffey card has now been graded more than 96,000 times, according to gemrate.com. And that's just PSA. If you include SGC, add another 11,000 plus cards graded. Now before we get into how many of the PSA graded cards got a perfect 10 and how rare it actually is, the second and third most graded baseball cards in the history of PSA to date, again according to gemrate.com, is the 1989 Ken Griffey Jr. Topps Traded card, followed by the 1989 Fleer card of, you guessed it, Ken Griffey Jr. Okay, so back to the 1989 Griffey card. How many got a PSA 10 grade out of the 96,000 plus submitted? Well, as of January 2023, there has been 4,120 PSA 10 cards, which is just a 4% gem rate. It explains in part why PSA 10 graded cards of the iconic 1989 Griffey is selling for nearly $2,000 despite millions of the raw cards printed. At the hobby peak though, in February 2021, once sold for more than $5,400. So you could try your luck if you are able to get a nice looking raw card, typically selling for $50 today. But in addition to making sure that the card has sharp corners, just a word of advice, check the centering of the front as well, and don't forget to check the centering of the hologram on the back. But if you're playing the odds, most cards come back with a PSA grade of 8, with nearly 40,000 of them out there, making up nearly 40% of the population count. It currently goes for about $80. But whether you have one and plan to submit it for grading, or you just have one for your personal collection, the 1989 Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck rookie card will always have a place in the history of the hobby.